Hi, I'm Tristan Miller, and this is Positive and Negative, a podcast about the intersectionality between mental health and the arts. On today's episode, I speak with comedian and musician Dylan Adler about his experience with trauma and sexual assault. Here he is speaking about recovery from sexual assault trauma.
And also, it is so possible to feel better. And I remember when I was in the middle of it, I thought that I would never feel better and that it was impossible to heal. But because that's how, like, when you're in that, it's the intensity of that feeling, that's how it feels. But it is possible to heal, and it's not your fault.
This podcast is brought to you in part by Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Tristan J. Miller for early access to extended interviews, as well as access to an archive of the first couple of seasons of this program. Our theme song is To Be or Nah by Billy Conahan off the album Leaping with Intent to Fly, available wherever fine music is sold. Here's Dylan. I hope you enjoy the talk. You've been doing backflips in your set. When did that start?
I started doing backflips. I started it when, during quarantine, I'm like, I kind of want to do a backflip on stage. I was like, how can I fit that in? So I somehow fit it into my set, and I have a little like punchline after the backflip.
It's very hard to follow that.
Yeah, it's hard to follow a backflip, and I've like shopped around different lines, and I'm happy with the one I've landed on, but I just kind of like do a backflip, and then because it's kind of like a celebratory, it's like kind of like a cheerleader, woo. So I try to like do like some impression of like that was so and so blah blah blah, and like make it something like I used to like do a backflip, woo woo, and I was like, that's me remembering my brother is a virgin.
Yeah,
that's like something funny. But I changed it because some people would be like, oh, what's wrong with that? I'm like, wait, yeah, you're right. I'll change. So I've changed it to something else.
That's fair. That's fair. Where'd you learn to do that?
I did gymnastics as a little kid.
Okay.
So that's how I learned how to do it.
Okay. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay. I was gonna say that's the only place I know is Marin County.
Really? Yeah, that's where I'm from.
Yeah, it's like I know George Lucas and Robin Williams were from that area, and that is it.
Oh my God. Someone in my class was George Lucas's godson. So
Of course.
And
that's a big comedy place. Was it always around, or
not really? No, not a big no, I mean, like not at least that I knew of. But I mean, there was like theater camp and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's where we were connecting over the fact that we both started doing theater.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. And when did you catch the acting bug, as they say?
When it came to, I actually didn't really act that much as a kid, because I was really shy and in the closet, and I didn't didn't have the confidence to be part of a play. But I caught the comedy bug when I did like a acting class at the college I went to. I went NYU, and I fell in love with that. And then I went to an improv jam and stand up, and then I just got addicted and never stopped.
Yeah. And then what were you going to NYU for, if not?
It was music composition.
Oh, yes. That makes sense, because you're a very accomplished musician and very funny at it. When did it occur to you to blend those two things?
I think it occurred to me to blend. Oh, by the way, thank you very much, as are you.
Oh, what?
And I think it occurred to me to blend it because I was doing music. I wanted to compose for theater, and a lot of, there were a lot of like standalone YouTube theater songs written by like Pazig and Paul and Kuman and Diamond.
Okay.
And they would write some comedy songs too. So I thought, oh, that's kind of fun. And so for like some of my songs that I would write for, my teacher, like for my degree, I tried to write like comedy songs too. And those were always really fun. And then when I started stand up, I thought I didn't think to connect it. I just started doing stand up. But then I thought, oh, maybe I'll just try out a comedy song, and it got like a bigger response than any of my like regular jokes did. So I'm like, oh, maybe I should try to like do this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I always, you know, I play a little piano, and my rule was always like, I'll play it if it's there. Did you, when you first did the first comedy song, did you
Yeah.
bring your whole keyboard and everything? How did that work?
Yeah, I did. I went. The Creek in the Cave had a piano.
Oh, really?
And at the base at their bottom floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I would play it, and and that's where I would like write most of my material. And then I thought, so for shows, if they didn't have a piano at the venue, I would lug a piano there and
Oh
have
my
to plug it
gosh.
into the system, and like, it was such a hassle, and it's huge.
Yeah. So how do you go about writing a song? What's your process there?
Yes, so for songs, it's been different for each one, but what I really like to do is I like to start with kind of like a premise, or just like an idea of like maybe this could be a funny song, and then I try to think of like what would be like a funny music to kind of juxtapose these lyrics and this kind of premise and this idea I have. Like, what would be kind of a funny underscore for this kind of energy that I want to convey. So then I start like, plunking out on the piano
Yeah.
and then like shaping out a melody, and then coming up with lyrics that I think that I like, that I think are funny. Then I'll go to a mic or a show and try them out. And depending on how they land, it's like, oh, I think this has legs, I'll keep going. Or sometimes I'm like, oh man, I think I need
Yeah.
to drop this one. Fuck. But
Yeah.
that's kind of how I work. And then usually melody and chords for the most part don't change that much. They sometimes do, but it's the lyrics that I will workshop to see like, all right, this works. What works best here, to kind of craft it.
Now, you're half Japanese, half Jewish, right?
Yes.
Growing up, was there a concerted effort to explore both of those cultures in the home?
A little bit, like my Japanese. I really wanted to learn Japanese, but my mom taught me a little bit, but not much. And we would eat Japanese food. We learned how to make sushi.
Very cool.
And things like that. And there are things that are just naturally kind of passed down through Japanese culture. But my mom was born and raised in California.
Okay.
So actually my grandma, my Obachan, grew up in the Central Valley of California too, moved back to Japan, and then moved back to the States. So my mom doesn't really speak Japanese that well too, so I don't think she really had that big of an urge to like pass Japanese culture to, because her parents didn't have that big urge for her as well. I don't think they wanted, my grandparents wanted my mom and her brothers and sisters to learn English well, and just kind of, I think their mentality was like acclimate.
Yeah.
Which makes sense during that period, because like a lot of experiencing internment and kind of like traumatized from that. So it's like, all right, let's just acclimate and try to, just to get by. But I think that was their mentality. So yeah, I guess that's a long-winded answer, but some of that. And then Jewish culture-wise, yes, some pieces of that. Like, we celebrated Hanukkah, we celebrated Passover and Rosh Hashanah. I really wanted to do a bar mitzvah, but I never did. And I was like, but I never went to like Hebrew school. But we and I went to like, during bar mitzvah season though, I went to like 40. So like by the end, me and my brother were like saying all the prayers together, because we remember. But we grew up with a little bit of that culture too. But also on my dad's side, a little bit like, they immigrated like very early, like 1800s, from the pogroms in Europe. So I think some traditions were like, we're like definitely, if anything, like reform. Yeah.
The Easter Christmas Catholics
Yes,
of
yes,
Jewish people.
yes, yes.
You mentioned your brother, and you have a twin brother.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had a bar mitzvah, it would have had to be on the
It
same
would have
day.
it would have been on the same day.
Yeah. Is it, as someone who's never had a twin,
Uh-huh.
how is that? Is there...
Yeah. Oh my. So yes, we always have shared our birthday, and having a twin. It's so funny when people ask that question. I think because I'm like, I don't know what it's like not to have a twin, actually, but I. I can speak on right now. Right now, I love having a twin brother.
Yeah.
He's a really good anchor, and I call him all the time, and he is, a really good support system sometimes too. And he's also gay, which is great because we can just kind of like, shoot the shit. We can kiki. We can just like, we have the same. We're very, very similar in that way. I think in high school we fought a lot because we were both in the closet, and we were just kind of like, I don't know, like we were just like angry at each other all the time, and because we were just kind of spent so much energy hiding. But as a kid, like before that, we were like playing all the time, making plays, and so I think we're both extroverts because of it, because we just kind of like thrive off of we like need other people and connection to like kind of for energy and sustenance. We like shared a womb, so I guess that's kind of what that's like.
That is a beautiful way to put it. Like, because I don't think a lot of people, at least myself, consider like, oh, you were like literally sharing the same life force.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Was it difficult coming out with your folks and everything, or I mean, you were in the Bay Area.
I'm in the Bay Area, which is pretty. I was fortunate compared to a lot of people and a lot of my friends, honestly. My high school though was very homophobic. People, I mean, like people's parents who voted for Obama, like their kids would like be dropping the F word and like, saying gay stuff. And it's like, what? Your dad voted for no on Prop 8 and for Obama. Like, what's this? But it was just very homophobic, and it was like kind of like kids were out, but they would get like, like they would get like teased and like, bullied and stuff sometimes. And it was so I wasn't out to my high school, but to my parents, luckily, like they were like accepting. And when I came out to the way I came out to my twin brother was we were driving, a friend of ours came out, and we were driving home, and we thought, oh my God, that was so brave. And I was like, the most porn I watch is of guys. And he was like, same. And so I was like, oh, I guess we're gay. That means we're gay. And now we got to come out to everyone, do a little tour. So that's how that.
Do a little tour.
Yeah, we did our coming out tour when friends and family, across the California.
Was there a pressure to?
I guess so, yeah, because it was something that it was a pressure to. Yeah, and sometimes my mom would be like, at the end of I remember when we were coming out to everyone, is like, well, don't you guys have something to say?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like, and we're like, yeah. Anyway, yeah, we're gay, but it was like nerve-wracking to say.
Yeah, of course.
But I think, yeah, me and my twin brother, when it came to like the people that we came out to in our close circles, very fortunate, very lucky that that people were like accepting.
Yeah. When you came here and you started doing comedy,
yeah,
you kind of said you got addicted to it. But is that the actual drive? Is it a continuation of the thrive of connection for family, do you think?
Wow, this deep. I'm actually unpacking it in therapy too. There's
really?
Like, yes. And I think the drive for comedy, I always really wanted to, I think I like always wanted to like perform. I think that's something, and I think being in the closet a little bit and being so quiet and like, that I was like prevented from that. But then like when I discovered performing and like the joy of that, I was like, oh shit, this is so much fun. And, it's also like Asian culture. It's not like, very encouraged to take up space, be very loud, but then like rediscovering kind of being able to do that was really nice. And also, like, I think when I discovered it, I really fell in love with it and doing it. But then also, I think there's a piece of it where it's like, like there's a connection piece that sometimes it fills that space of like connecting with audiences and connecting with like people and being able to write things that like surprise people, or it is like a form of that connection, like
Yeah.
desire for connection, healthy or not. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we define so much what's healthy or not as how disruptive it is to one's life.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you feel it gets in the way sometimes?
mm. I you know it's honestly where I am right now.
Yeah.
It is like my entire life.
Yes.
It is so encompassing so many things. And sometimes I do like have work too, like composing music for companies and that to make money, but like other than that I do in the morning, it is like completely my life. So it's hard to say how much it gets in the way, because it is. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that it, like, for the most part, that it might get in the way of is like time for like taking a breather and like just kind of recuperating and like being able to like rest and also deal with like take care of your
Yeah.
inner children, your inner child, the play and the fun and like maintaining relationships. And that is what it gets in the way of. But also I think um the being able to like connect with people and write things that are important to me is also something very important.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's kind of what, yeah,
Yeah,
in a way.
I got you. Do you think of stand up as work or play?
Oh man, sometimes oh, stand up, okay, sometimes it
What
does.
was the thing you thought I said?
I was like so comedy, I was thinking of, oh, like writing and something.
Well,
So
both.
stand up to me
Mm-hmm.
sometimes does feel like work, because sometimes it's like, oh shit, I don't have time to write something new for this, and it's, oh, I'll just do the same stuff. But then it does feel like play where when I'm writing shit, where I'm like trying out a newish bit and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can do this. And when I feel like I can, when things feel malleable and things feel like,
Yeah.
oh, I can add a new tag just that I thought of recent, and I can just, so that's when it feels fun and exciting, when I'm
Mm-hmm.
writing, when I'm thinking of something new.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it feels like play, and it feels really fun. And even also sometimes like when it's a really good show,
Yeah.
that feels like fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It feels like play. But especially when it's like you're able to like think of new things to say on stage, and that's when it feels the funnest to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You said you were in therapy. What led to that?
Yeah, so I've been in therapy for a while, and I first went into it when I first did it when I was in high school and I was in the closet and also getting bullied. But the thing is, I would go to therapy and be like, I didn't know those were the problems. I was like, yeah, I feel like I have and we talked around the problem for like
Sure.
many sessions, and I'm like, well, bye. And then I guess and yeah, but it's so I didn't even like think that being gay or was like being closeted was the problem. But
Mm-hmm.
I then did it later when in college I was raped, and I went to therapy for treatment for that. And it was helpful for a while, and then for a while I thought like, oh man, I think, yeah, this is good, and I felt like pretty healed. But then like I kept having like sexual experiences where I would like keep getting like extremely triggered by like just like minimum like just making out or like
Yeah.
small things and physical contact, and then it got like very extreme where I'm like, I really don't know what the fuck's going on. So I had to go back to therapy. I found a new one who specialized in trauma, who I still have today, and she's very helpful, very good. um so yeah, that's kind of what led to like
Mm-hmm.
me finding her.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, yeah.
And you're obviously very open about what happened with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think there's a certain pressure being a man to not talk about it?
I did, yeah, I did feel that. I for sure. And it's not that talked about in the gay community.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the gay community is a very sexually open and very like sex parties, circuit parties, blah blah blah. And like when it comes to like consent in the gay community, it is so not even like a discussion because it's like and it's like and it's like but I think I definitely needs to be more talked about and like
Mm-hmm.
discussed in the gay community. But also I think when I would you know when I first decided to do jokes about it,
Yeah.
I felt like my big fear was I thought people would be like, of course it didn't happen to this dude. Like it didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen to. It's like he's making a joke about it, and he's like like. And I remember before I did because Kelly had seen some of my material about it, and she booked me on her show Rape Jokes by Survivors, and I was the only male identifying person on the lineup. So I thought, so I was excited, but also part of me was like, fuck, people,
Mm-hmm.
it's like they're not going to believe me. They think I'm co-opting this thing that actually happens to women. You're crazy, and like other voices. But I felt like on the show really fortunate that I felt welcomed and believed, and everyone deserves to feel that. And I know that so many men, straight men, I like trans men, non-binary, like anyone like that feel like their narratives of like being a victim of sexual violence aren't like talked about or like shown or like portrayed. It's like my experience, but I think like I just want like if anyone's listening, if your experience is 100% valid, and
Mm-hmm.
it I think there's more like nuances and more stories coming out like because consent is just across the board. um it affects everyone. It affects queer people. It affects straight people. It affects everyone. It affects. Um, so I think it's getting better in that regard. But yeah, I think I did feel a sense of that. I
Mm-hmm.
think
How did you? I mean, was telling jokes about it the way you overcome it?
it was a step, a big
Mm-hmm.
step, and it really helped me because I think it was something in my life that I tried to shut out, and I'm like, I'm never gonna talk. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to go there, that space that's in me, and then find a little like, nugget of humor,
Mm-hmm.
and then make other people laugh with it. I'm like, that's such a. I want to keep doing this always.
Is there a concern when you are talking about
Oh
material
yeah,
about that, but other people in the audience might have experienced something similar? Are
sure.
you ever concerned that you're going to upset them, like trigger their anxiety?
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yes.
how do you balance that and make it
Yes.
palatable?
Yes,
It's
exactly.
very
So,
tricky.
very tricky because the thing is, when I started telling jokes about my experience with rape trauma, sometimes it would I would do it at mics for comics.
Uh
Sometimes
huh.
it'd go rough, but comics have a dark sense of humor, and they're
Yes.
like, they're kind of, they've seen crazy shit.
Yeah.
So they're like kind of down and ready for like that kind of stuff. But audiences I know are like, oh fuck, did he just talk about that? I thought
Mm-hmm.
what? Like it's a little more like, which totally makes sense. It makes sense. And I don't ever really want to like, trigger an audience member who's not ready to hear that. So it is a tricky balance. I have, to be honest, I don't know if I found the balance because
Mm.
I used to do my song where I talk about my experience with rape trauma, and sometimes the audience will go hush, and sometimes the audience is like, ooh, like they're like, me too.
Yeah.
So some people really dig it, and then some people I can tell it's like, so I've actually kind of taken it out of the song for now when I just do shows that I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. But when it comes to when a show that me and Kelly wrote called Rape Victims Are Horny Too, we
Yeah.
give a trigger warning, and we're very clear, this is going to be a triggering show if you're a survivor of sexual assault, of rape and sexual violence. We're talking about this stuff, and we're trying to, our coping mechanism is laughing, and that's kind of what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. When you're playing the songs or
Mm-hmm.
telling the jokes, does it trigger anything in you sometimes?
You know, when it's one joke, when it's like a short verse, it used to actually.
Yeah?
Yes, because I had to remember the event, which is triggering
Yeah.
to remember it. But the more I did it, the more it became like this is my joke. This is just like my material, which is kind of like a cathartic thing in itself, that it's like taking the kind of like real fear and like very charged nature out of like that, and being able to go there and come back and be okay.
Yeah.
I think is but yeah, I definitely had moments when we did our hour-long show that felt like, oh Lord, I'm feeling it. Oh God, my parts are going crazy. You know, children like,
Yeah. So it's kind of like miniature exposure therapy then.
it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
is that something that's advised by your therapist, or is it your therapist like, hey man, like maybe
My therapist really encourages it.
Yeah?
She's really dope. She's really cool. I'm very lucky to have her.
good.
She's dope.
In the day to day,
Yeah.
how does this sort of thing affect you? Like you were saying with physical contact.
Yes.
and that sort of thing.
So for me personally, where I am right now, physical contact is like, it's triggering, and it's like I wish it weren't that way, and I've been trying to look into like therapies, like how can I help, like how can I help, but
So this past year must have been a blessing for you. Everyone's 6 feet
honestly,
away.
it was so, that is like the 6 feet shit. Can you keep that up? I'm like, that is great. Oh my God, I love this 6 feet shit. Like, this is so nice. I love that. And I you know what the thing is? I didn't even realize, like, I kind of let people touch me and shit, but I didn't realize, like, and I would like go to bed and like my feeling triggered, and I'm like, oh, why am I feeling so triggered? I didn't realize until like the 6 feet thing happened. I'm like, oh my God, that's what it was. I did take out. So it made me realize like how triggering physical contact was for me. So it does kind of affect me in like that, some certain scenarios, like when I'm in a crowded comedy show, I'm like greeting people, like hugging people, and like, I'm like kind of like a welcoming, my demeanor, like I don't like to be like, I don't like to put up boundaries in general. So like, it's hard for me honestly to be like, hey, I'm sorry, I just don't really like physical contact. Is it okay if like you don't touch me? And like my close friends who I'm close with know like my physical boundaries, but people I don't always say it, because I'm like, yeah, I don't know why it's difficult for me to put up those boundaries, but I'm like, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's politeness. You
Sure.
You don't want to make the other person feel uncomfortable.
I don't want them to feel uncomfortable.
As if they've done something wrong, which they haven't inherently. It's just
Yeah,
not right for
exactly.
you.
Yeah, I don't want them to feel weird, and I don't want them to be like, oh, that's fucking, what the hell? Like, that's weird, that weirdo.
Yeah.
This guy, and then like, yeah, I think like there's a part of me that's like, it's just easier to like put up with it, like go, like give a little hug and like just go. But then like, I think I want to get better at like, no, it's like I really would feel better if, for now, at least for now, like not much physical contact.
And when you get triggered, what does that feel like to you?
It feels like it's a little bit of like lightheaded. It's a little bit of like, it's like, it goes in levels. It's like levels of triggeredness. So there's like, okay, complete TMI. This is total TMI, but like my scrotum will like just like tighten.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Like when that'll just tighten. And that's like a fear thing, I think. Like it'll feel like a little bit of dizziness. Maybe my heart will beat a little bit, and I'll just kind of like feel a little dissociated. And it's like all on a spectrum. Sometimes it's like very minorly, but then sometimes it's like I'm so dissociated I can't hear and I can't see. That was one time, but that was like really bad.
Was that in public?
Yes.
Oh no.
You know what it was? It's actually kind of a hilarious story. It was during a drag queen brunch.
Oh boy.
And I was like with my family, and I was like losing my hearing, and I'm like, Mom, I don't think I can hear. Oh my God. And all I saw was static. I just saw static. It was crazy. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. And then like the drag queen show started. Ba 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 ba. Everyone welcome Donna Sachet to the stage. And I'm like, wow, you really can't write this stuff. It was so funny. It was so funny.
It is so good.
I know.
Do you think doing comedy, like, one of the reasons you do it is because you can control the interactions you have with people?
I think there is a sense of like the niceness and the control. There's like a I think there's like control that there's a little more control that I have over what I speak about when it comes to like trauma stuff or what I put out there and like how how much I put out in the control over the narrative a little bit too, I think.
Yeah. And I would assume, and maybe this is me projecting my own problems onto you, but like having lost control very severely in that one instance, you would look for other places to be able to control a situation. Yeah, you think, or not?
That would make sense. That makes sense. I'm not sure if it's quite resonating right now, but I think that there is a semblance of like wanting to make something joy out of something that felt out of control and something that feels very nebulous and very intense.
You talked a little bit about how the gay community treats this sort of thing. And I would love to hear more about that if you're willing to.
Yeah, so when it comes to like consent and like physical contact, like just yesterday I was at like a party with some like gays and stuff and like also like I'm still horny as hell. I'm horny and I need validation and there's a part I want a boyfriend. Hey, I want a boyfriend.
Of course.
I want a boyfriend to always stay 6 feet away from me and just cook me every meal and film every show that I do. That's not much to ask. Who looks like Henry Golding? It's not much. That's literally bare minimum. But I mean, I think, and yeah, I went and I think, at least in gay culture, there's like a sense of like, there's still like kind of trickle down closeted mentality of like, I see you, you see me, let's just like go and like no words spoken, no consent. Like there's like that kind of mentality. And like, I've had plenty of positive experiences with other gay men and like experiences that was crazy, but like I think there has to be a conversation about like consent and protecting other gay men. Like, sometimes you'll see like a gay guy like blackout drunk at a bar and it's like, oh, and like there's like like there's still like there's a guy like pressing on them and flirt, and it's like, we have to look out for, it's not just, we have to look out for that. There's scenarios where people really aren't like capable of like, because they're so drunk or like for whatever reason. Like I think there needs to be more of that in the queer community. For sure.
There has been some talk over the years about how most queer spaces involve some sort of alcohol. There's not like a sort of like a cafe you can go to that's mostly for queer people.
For sure.
How do you feel about that?
I want there to be a queer library. No, I'm just kidding.
I was thinking that's so cute though.
Yeah. But I think that's
Quiberry.
A quiberry. A quibby
or a biberry if it's just bisexual people.
I love that. No work gets done.
No work. All play. No one's a doughboy.
No one is reading. Everyone's just fucking. But no. But I think alcohol being involved in it just informs like queer culture. It really does. Like Stonewall, like that's a bar. That's where queer liberation happened, at a bar.
Yeah.
So I think it does inform, and I don't drink anymore. I'm sober.
Really?
Yeah. And I think it's because I realized during quarantine, I thought when things slowed down, I'm like, I think I was really kind of drinking. There's a healthy way to drink, and I was drinking a little bit to like dull some pain.
Yeah.
So I think I've still kept it up, and I don't really miss it that much even. But I think that for now, I just like realizing that, I was just kind of dulling a lot of shit.
Is that hard to manage? Because a lot of comedy shows are in bars.
A lot of them are in bars and a lot of drink tickets. But
Yep.
I'm like, I don't actually. I'll just give it to a friend of mine.
Yeah.
I'll just give the drink ticket to a friend who came to the show.
Yeah. So I would imagine there was a fair amount of anxiety not being able to fully accept yourself as a young person.
Mm-hmm.
Did that dissipate when you came out? And if so, do you still deal with like anxiety and that sort of thing? Or am
When
I
it comes
again
to
assuming?
No, when it comes to that, I think a lot of my life improved after I came out. So much
Yeah.
improved, and I was very lucky and fortunate to have a circle of my friends and family to be accepting. Um, but I think every single queer person still has that piece in them.
Yeah.
Every single one. Walking in New York is just it there unless it's pride, like there is like a sense of, it's so dangerous. It's like, I don't know, it's weird. Yeah, does that I don't know. There is a sense of not being able to fully express your complete just for like a safety measure.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. Maybe I'm like
Well, it's certainly how you feel.
sure, yeah, that's how I feel.
So that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I guess every queer person has a piece of that.
Yeah. Of
Yeah.
holding on to some sort of societal pressure.
Yeah. And it's like there's some it's like um yeah, holding on to societal pressure, I guess. And I know like on the subway there's so many like people like screaming transphobic things and just like homophobic things, and you're like, "Oh fuck, like this is I mean, the only day that can't happen is on Pride because there are just too many. Like you would
Yeah.
have to, that's so much energy. Actually, there are just too many people to possibly hate crime.
Yeah. It's just,
You
I
know?
don't have the time.
Yeah, you just would you would run out of energy. You'd run out of steam.
Yeah. After 20 minutes.
After 20 minutes.
You just pass out on the subway.
Yeah.
So I would love to know a little bit about this, and let me know if I'm overstepping here. But I've heard from other people of Asian descent, specifically men, that there is a weird sort of almost when people are dating Asian men, there's like, I don't know what to do here. Or like how do I put this? Like a lack of attraction or something. Like, do
Okay.
you feel do you understand what I'm kind of getting at?
Okay, so yes, when it comes to that experience, I, we were talking on the street and like all the hate crimes that was happening
Yeah.
too. It was like something that I viscerally felt too because I was attacked by someone on the street too, and it fucked me up. And it was like, I guess I don't know. That's a piece of like why I would say like I still like kind of get weird when someone walks close behind me,
Mm-hmm.
because that's kind of like, I just don't like to have blind spots. But complete other tangent. This piece of it. I think I did feel a piece. I do feel a piece of that when it comes to like gay dating, and there's like either it's stuck between two things, either being like invisible, like like there's some like white queers who are like, I just don't find any Asians attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And then so like they just, and it's like you're just invisible.
Mhm.
Or it's like you're an object, and it's like there's too much of it's like a fetish, and it's like, and then a feeling of like, oh, I'm just trapped with these two options. Is this all I have? This is like this is what I'm gonna have to fall in love with. This is my love life, I guess. Shit. So I felt a little bit of that, but also I've always thought Asian men were hot as hell. Like I grew, I grew up in like around like sexy Asians. I always thought like I had a
Your
crush
brother.
on like my brother, of course, like cousins. No, but I grew up like Ryan Higa, and like I thought he was hot. I'm like, Asians were fucking sexy, but it's like I think some people just like there is like a that stereotype and like put like onto like Asian men, and there's like a piece of history to it too, and then like the hypersexualization of Asian women too.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always thought. I mean, like the guy who I had a crush on my whole life was like my like childhood crush was an Asian guy.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like it's very frustrating and like gets into your body to like get those signals from people in like the queer community, and also just like in general to like feel like, oh yeah, there are some people who just fully are like, oh, Asians, no.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, fuck. And then like others who are like, Asians, it's like, no, I don't want that either. Is this it? Like, yeah. But um yeah, I guess I honestly have not been dating any because mostly because of trauma,
Yeah.
and I don't like physical contact, but also because of maybe there's a piece of that too. I don't know.
Yeah. Makes sense. So you were attacked?
Yeah, 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 on the street.
Do you want to talk about it or
Yeah,
not?
yeah, 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 yeah. I was uh I was on a bench and I was on my phone, and then a guy was approaching me, and it was just like looking at me really weird, and I was like, "Whoa, what the fuck is going on here? Why is he?" And then he kept walking towards me and like walking closer, and I'm like, I don't really like this, and so
Yeah.
I like got a little afraid, and I was also angry. I'm like, get the fuck out of my space. I flipped him off, and then he started running for me. And then he ran for me for like a while, and then cornered me, and then like punched me and like started kicking, and then I had to
Ooh.
like fight back and punch back, and he started screaming at me, and then like I ran away and outran him.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was kind of scary. And
Yeah.
afterwards, I was just like hyped up. I was like, what the fuck? And I was just like amped. But then like, it just made me like I still don't like when people like walk behind me
Yeah.
because that's like because like being chased,
Yeah, of
for like
course.
blocks is like scary. And people were looking, people were like watching the whole thing, and like they were like, "What is this a drug deal? What's going on?
Oh
Like
my
what is
god.
this?" Um, yeah, that's what happened.
And I'm sure that must have exacerbated all of the feelings you've had before of like the anxiety and all of that, right?
Sure, 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 sure.
And how did you get through that?
Um, yeah, it was hard it was really difficult for like it was difficult, but I think I did, I have a therapist,
Yeah.
so we talk, and I
Okay.
have friends to call, so
That's fair.
yeah, I just try to keep myself a little busy.
Hmm.
Busyness.
There's a joke you do in your set where you say what you don't realize is I'm evil. Believe that is that coming from a place of like dislike of yourself?
Oh man. Okay, so the evil.
Yeah.
We're just getting right into it.
Yeah, man.
The evil, I think that comes from I also really just love evil characters
Yeah.
and queer villains very much. And I've always, really I've always loved like queer coded villains and queer characters. And that's a something that I slip into a lot. But I guess like to really get into it, there are I feel like everyone is composed of an amalgamation of a lot of parts and pieces. And I think there is a piece that was affected by trauma that
Hmm.
feels like very angry and very just but I guess when it specifically sexual trauma, feeling very
Hmm.
angry, very just like just wants to scream, like wants to kick and punch and like that. And I think when it comes to that, there might be a piece of that that feels like that part is like, oh, this part is bad, but it's like, no, this part is just like angry and like
Hmm.
was hurt and stuff. So that, yeah. And also there's a piece that it's like when it talking about Asian identity and like resentment I have towards white people and white gays and that. And it's like in my head I'm like, yeah, I can talk about white people. Fuck white people. Yeah, I'm half white. I can say fuck that and fuck that. But then there's like a greater piece that feels like I'm a bad person for thinking that, and like for being angry at white people, and for like expressing and for saying that and spewing that. And like I can tell myself in my brain like, oh my god, you're valid, that's valid. In my body it's like, no, I truly do feel that
Mm-hmm.
that it's bad. And I think that's something I recently like am uncovering, that it's
Mm-hmm.
like my brain isn't always what my body feels. So
Yeah.
I guess that is a little piece of like evil, and I like and I love gravitating towards like evil characters and
Mm.
stuff. And maybe there's a queer element to it, because like queers are told like that's wicked to be what you are, and it's like, well, I'm gonna embrace it now. I'm gonna love it. It's great to be, you know,
Wicked is specifically a very good word for her.
wicked.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Do you have a hard time processing anger?
yeah, I
Yeah.
do, because I there's something that's actually cool is I'm able to express it on stage, which
Yeah.
is nice, and I like to do it, and it feels good. But I feel like I should sign up for a fucking boxing class. I don't know, because I
Sure.
have a lot of like repressed anger that I don't let out, because like I guess my demeanor is not that way, and I want to like, remain connected
Mm-hmm.
to people, and I don't want to like, I don't like putting up boundaries or like ever being that. But I mean, sometimes I think there's balance, and I should more. But I think anger and like releasing it and processing it has always been like interesting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were just talking now, you talked about your dislike of white people.
No. And it's also when I say that,
Yeah.
I don't want to like say like I hate all white people. And
Of
like
course.
that's a piece of me that's been like traumatized by like
Yeah.
white people. And also, the person who like raped me was a white man, and it was like
Mm-hmm.
I think there was like a fetishization thing going on too, where
Mm.
he, and like a piece of that, anger of that, feeling like rejected and like undesirable, as well as like an object, and like there's like a lot of pieces that after, and like resentment after like being attacked to, the guy was a white, it was just like a lot of built up resentment that I have. And it's not that my dad is white. I love there, I mean,
That
like
was what I was gonna
there are
ask.
people, white people in my life who I love so much, but there is like a well of some anger, and that I
Understandably
have
so.
for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's completely reasonable. Like, even
Mm.
conceptually, if you were just like, fuck white people, I think we'd all be like, yeah, that makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
But then with the specific two things you listed, like, yeah, absolutely, it makes
Uh-huh.
sense. But being mixed race, was that ever like did that ever make you feel some kind of way?
Yeah, it's very interesting because half Jewish, half Japanese. All my life, I never thought of myself as white, because
Mm.
also me and my twin brother, we look fairly Asian. We
Mm.
look fair like some like we look fairly Asian, even for like mixed, like someone who's mixed Asian. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've always just kind of thought of myself as like Asian. That's what I saw in the mirror. Grew up in a predominantly white space, so it's like compared to everyone else, it's like, oh yeah, I am. Everyone doesn't even assume I'm mixed race. They're like, oh yeah, the Asian kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until recently I thought, oh my God, no, I'm mixed. I'm this other thing. I'm mixed race Asian, and I think I'm coming to terms with it recently. But I think there's a piece that I'm like unfolding with that too, of being mixed race, and Jewish and Japanese, and yeah. And I think when I talk about my anger towards white people too, sometimes
Yeah,
my
yeah.
dad will get like, what,
Yeah, of course.
like some, I mean, and that makes sense. But I love him very much, and he's like, of course I love him so much, he's my dad, I love him so much.
Yeah.
But I can't like ignore like this piece that
Yeah.
I like, the anger too.
Do you feel guilty? Do you,
Yes.
yeah?
Yeah.
You have a different kind of white guilt.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. For feeling that anger,
Oh, well, I
or
mean,
guilt, or
for,
white guilt, you
yeah,
think?
like you know, being able to observe how white people are shitty and still being half white yourself. Does that make you feel some kind of way?
That's very interesting. I guess pieces of that. I feel
Okay.
pieces of that, because I think that when it comes to, it's like I think an Asian person put it really perfectly, and I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like Asians will, a lot of white people will put their white guilt on Asians too, because they're like, they don't think of Asians as like, an Asian American identity is so neither here nor there.
Mm.
It's so like, kind of like, you're you're basically like, Asians will like think of, be like, you deserve all the white guilt that we feel, but you don't get any of the privilege either. So it's like, you should feel like, all like, white people, I feel like, have felt so confident telling me that I can't even do a Japanese accent, or like, you can't do, like, telling me I can't do my, or like, they feel so comfortable telling me like what I can't. And it's like, bitch, like, what? I don't know, like,
People are really policing you like that?
sometimes, yeah.
Aye.
Yeah. I don't know. So I think, yes, I have felt pieces of white guilt. And also, my dad has said to me, he's like, you don't know what real racism is like. You've never experienced it. You're not black in this country.
Oof.
The experience of being black in this country and it's very different. It's very different. And it's like, it is, yes, it is like, um, and it's like, it's very, very, I can't imagine, it's very difficult, it's very, there's so much to deal with, so much racism. But I also think that there was a treatment of like, at least by white people, like, Asian is like, oh, Asian is like, there's no racism there, there's
Yeah.
no discrimination there. It's like, no, but our identity is valid, and we, it's like feeling of like, not having ground to stand on. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah.
So I have felt kind of a piece of that white guilt, and that kind of like, oh yeah, I should just like, no, I really believe for a long time, no one's ever been racist to me in my life. And I believe that. And I'm like, yeah, no, I just feel this way. And racism isn't real. And Asian jokes are cool. Like, I don't know, like feeling that way, and then kind of unpacking recently.
Yeah. What would be your biggest piece of advice for someone who's just experienced some sort of sexual trauma?
I think that my biggest piece of advice is that it's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I believe you, and it's not your fault. And I think that, and also, it is so possible to feel better. And I remember when I was in the middle of it, I thought that I would never feel better and that it was impossible to heal. But because that's how, like, when you're in that, it's the intensity of that feeling, that's how it feels. But it is possible to heal, and it's not your fault. And definitely recommend trauma therapy, a therapist that, specializes in trauma. Because, like, without, EMDR, doing that. I highly recommend doing that treatment.
What's EMDR?
EMDR is a trauma treatment where you hold vibrating buzzers that will go back and forth, and it will take you back to traumatic experiences, but in a way that helps you process it in a non-traumatic way. I had to do it about like 7 sessions before it like really kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is very helpful.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I have everything I need on my end. Is there anything you want to tell people before we get out of here?
Yes, follow me on online. You can follow my Instagram at DylanAdler _. You can follow me on Twitter at DylanAdler6. I promise I am a comic, and it's some funny things. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can follow me there. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Tristan.
Yeah, thank you for your openness.
Appreciate it.
That is the question. I think therefore I am a legend. It's 24/7, 365. Parents advise discretion with thoughts like mine. Empires fall, you should know that these walls only up for protection. World on guard, got them all on the edge. Walls at 8 feet, barely balance the tension. Raising the heat, I could leap any second. Fall to the street and be home by 11. Do an interview with KP on the session and laugh when he asks if it's